Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Bennett, and I was the administrative assistant. I won't use that word gopher, that I got to do it with pleasure. What I'd like to do is just, you know how the Japanese have their treasures? Well, we've already met one treasure. This is a second treasure. You remember Leonard Blessing, who knew Maitland very well in his years when he was teaching. George Gross had the pleasure, when he was president of NJSTA, to be able to put together the part of the will so that we would eventually get Maitland's money. And as you know, $500,000 came our way as science teachers, and we as a board, and Leonard and George and I are on this committee, as Adele and a few others, how to choose to spend this money. And so we've done the institutes, and the audience we've got here today are those participants in this year's institute. So I'm going to leave Leonard and George to talk about Maitland P. Simmons.
I met Maitland about 1957. It was probably at the annual conference that we had in Atlantic City at that time in the Haddon Hall Hotel. I was nobody. Just somebody who went to the conference, that's all. He, in my estimation, was a distinguished figure. He's older than I, and so, you know, you have a certain degree of respect for older people, as I've noticed since I've gotten older. I remember it was with a group of people just standing around and talking. We were talking sometimes about school, sometimes about New Jersey politics, and other small talk. I didn't even know who Maitland was. He was just introduced to me, and he was one of the officers of this group, but that didn't mean anything to me. And then I met him again in 58 or 59 at meetings of different New Jersey science groups, not committees, but the programs that they would put on, like the geology group or the chemistry group or the biology group, whatever it was. And he was very personable. As I remember, he worked in Irvington. That's where he spent the overwhelming amount of his career. But he worked specifically in Myrtle Avenue School. I guess it would be equivalent to a junior high school. We talked about things. He came out with his book. I don't know when it was published, but I knew about it in 58 or 59, I think. And then I guess I went away for a year, and I worked in Europe as a school teacher. And when I came back, I met him a few times, and then kind of lost touch with him at 1962 or 3, something like that. You want to start talking?
In 1960s, the state of New Jersey had a policy that they had to forcibly retire teachers. And when you reached the age of 65, you were placed on a list where you were summarily dismissed from the public schools. And at that time, I was in school, and I lost all my teachers in high school because they were all 70, 72, 75 years old. And at that time, Maitland retired. He retired in the mid-1960s when that law was passed. My first running in with Mate was in 1972. We received a letter. I was the president or president-elect of the New Jersey Science Teachers. And we received a letter from a lawyer in Florida. And his name was Leonard Poisel, and it said in there that Maitland Simmons, and some people said, you know, well, who is he? But Leonard was around, and he knew who he was, and they wanted to meet with us, and they wanted to meet to set his will. So the executive board at that time bought me an airline ticket to Vero Beach, Florida, where he was living. And he had purchased a home down there, and it was quite a beautiful home. So I flew to Vero Beach to meet with him and Mr. Poisel, the lawyer, to discuss. Apparently the terms were, if you met with them, you would be included in the will. And nobody knew what it meant. We didn't know if it meant $5 or, $500 or $5,000 or anything. But the board sent me down there, and I had a wonderful couple of days visiting with him. He was quite a guy, even at that age. Every day he would swim in the ocean, 5 miles, and he would swim up, and someone would pick him up and drive him back. And he swam with several younger people, for safety. And I went down, and always in a suit and tie, the whole while we were there. Saw his house and his belongings and met with him and the lawyer, and we discussed. And at that time is when he said he would like to have any bequests go toward the training of, at that time they called them junior high school teachers. The contingency on his will was his wife Toni, who was a very attractive woman, even at the age of 70, I think she was 78 when I met her, was that if he predeceased her, she would take the entire estate, but, and the terms were, the money was to be as he chose to distribute it. So she could live off the income from his estate, but when she passed away, that money would go back to revert back to his original will. And so Mate passed away in the late 1980s. I got a note from Toni, and she informed me. And so at that point, I went down to Vero Beach again on a personal vacation and stopped in, and she had moved into a care facility. They had sold the home, and she was in one of these progressive care facilities and had all the furnishings from the house, beautiful antiques and paintings and all kinds of items. And she gave me several of the items that he had kept from NJSTA, and they were put into the archives. Well, Toni lived for another more than 10 years before she passed away in the early 2000. And we received another letter. Well, the association received another letter at that time from from the bank. Mr. Poisel was no longer there, but the bank was, informing the association that he had left a bequest. We again had no idea, and the officers at that time had no idea what that bequest was. In fact, at one point I believe it was said that, gee, is this a joke or something? Is this, is this a fake letter, or is this a scam? And they received a letter of how much it would be, and it was well in excess of $400,000. Well, the will was set up, and I was not aware until the actual end. Mate was a very thoughtful person, and he wanted science, so New Jersey science teachers and the National Science Teachers Association received equal shares, okay? And then he gave an equal share to his university, University of Rhode Island, because both he and Toni were from Rhode Island. And they were, from quite prestigious families, but neither of them had family or children left. And in his will, he left bequests to Montclair State College, to the local library, to the local church, to the local elementary school, and each one got a 30-second or 2 30-seconds or 7 30-seconds, whatever it was, of his will. And our share equaled $500,000. And so we formed the committee once we found out it was in fact real. And Leonard and I have both served on that committee since the beginning, right?
Right.
And contributed in our own ways.
I know when I first heard about it, it was at one of these meetings here that might have been you, George, who mentioned it to me, or it might have been in a public meeting. I don't remember. But when it was said more than $400,000, I said, where in the world did Maitland Simmons ever get that kind of money from? And knowing that it was from the 50s or so, and $400,000 was a lot of dough in those days, really, far more than it is now. And I wondered, well, what will we do with it? And I don't know how it came about that we would form this, the actual committee. Do you remember?
Yeah, we were both asked if we would serve on the committee.
Yeah, I remember that.
By the president, and try to establish a way of distributing the funds.
Who was the president at the time?
I believe it was Nancy Evans Bennett. And
Was it? Are you here, Nancy?
Yep, she's in
Was
the back.
it? Do you remember? Was it you?
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was. Okay, yeah.
And so we sat down and we discussed some of the details.
Yeah.
And
Let's talk about the wisest thing that I did, and that was to appoint Adela to be the chair of this particular committee.
That was a very
And
wise
she's
move.
the one who
Yeah.
has absolutely made this whole thing work. So I just had the honor of getting the letter.
Well, Adela was a very excellent appointee to the first job. I think it's elective now. Isn't it elective now? We all get elected to our positions on the committee.
well, we
But
keep,
I'm never letting
we-
Adela off the committee.
right, we keep her as,
Oh, yeah.
we keep her as chair because
Yeah.
she does such a good job.
Yeah, I know that.